The train's whistle pierced the cold Montana morning as Victoria Hartwell watched the conductor hand her sealed trunk back through the window, his eyes avoiding hers with the practiced indifference of a man who had witnessed too many broken dreams at railway stations. She stood on the platform of Ukiah Station, her dark blue traveling dress collecting dust from the dry September wind of 1878, and realized that the man who had paid for her passage from Boston, the man whose carefully worded letters promised a new life on the Montana frontier, had rejected her without so much as opening the door to meet her face to face. The humiliation burned hotter than the shame she had felt leaving Massachusetts 3 weeks ago. At 23 years old, Victoria had gambled everything on becoming a mail-order bride to Samuel Preston, a merchant she had never met, only to discover that whatever he saw through his shop window when she stepped off the train had been enough to send her right back. The problem was that she had spent her last dollars on the items in her trunk, gifts she had hoped would please her new husband. She had nothing left for a return ticket, no family to wire for help after her father's death from consumption last winter, and no prospects in a town where everyone would soon know she had been refused at first sight. Victoria gripped the handle of her trunk as the train began to pull away, leaving her standing alone on the weathered boards of the platform. The weight of her situation pressed down on her shoulders as heavily as the Montana sun. She had nowhere to go. "That belongs to me now, I reckon." The voice came from behind her, deep and rough like gravel shifting beneath wagon wheels. Victoria spun around to face a tall man in worn denim and a dust-covered hat, his face shadowed by the wide brim. He stood with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this harsh land, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun. "I beg your pardon." Victoria straightened her spine, trying to summon the dignity her mother had spent years teaching her, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The man pushed his hat back, revealing sun-weathered skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He could not have been much older than 30, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains rising in the distance. "Preston owes me $800 for cattle," he said, nodding toward her trunk. "Been chasing that debt for 6 months. Judge Harrington ruled this morning that I could claim anything of value belonging to Preston to settle the account. That trunk there, Preston paid for it, so it is mine now." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "You cannot be serious." "Everything I own is in there." "Then Preston should have paid his debts." The man's expression did not change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Not quite sympathy, but not entirely indifferent either. "Name is Parker Iverson. I run the Double I Ranch about 8 miles north of here. My belongings are not his to forfeit. They belong to me." Victoria stepped between Parker and her trunk, even though she barely reached his shoulder. "I purchased everything in there with my own money. After he sent you the funds for your journey, I would wager." Parker crossed his arms over his chest. "That makes it his money, which makes it my compensation." Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right, technically. Samuel Preston had sent her $200 to purchase appropriate items for frontier life and to cover her travel expenses. Every piece of clothing, every book, every small treasure in that trunk had been bought with his money. "Please." The word caught in her throat, pride warring with desperation. "I have nothing else. No money for lodging, no way to return home. If you take that trunk, I will have nothing but the dress on my back." Parker studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving from her carefully pinned auburn hair to her fine leather boots, assessing her the way he might evaluate livestock at auction. Victoria forced herself not to flinch under his scrutiny. "You have any skills besides looking pretty in fancy dresses?" he asked finally. Heat flooded Victoria's cheeks. "I can read and write. I kept my father's accounts for his law practice. I can cook, so manage a household. I am not some useless ornament, Mr. Iverson. No need to get prickly." Something that might have been amusement touched the corner of his mouth. "I am making you an offer. My ranch needs a housekeeper. Last one married a miner and headed to the gold fields 3 months ago. Place is falling apart without someone to manage it. You work for me and you can keep your trunk. You want to hire me?" Victoria searched his face for signs of improper intentions, but his expression remained neutral. 6 days a week. Sundays off for church if you are inclined. Room and board included plus $30 a month. That is fair wages for this territory. Parker settled his hat more firmly on his head. "I have 3 ranch hands who bunk in the barn. They will keep a respectful distance, and so will I. You will have the guest room in the main house, with a lock on the door." Victoria's mind raced through her options. She could refuse and hope someone in town would take pity on her, though the curious stares from the few people on the street suggested that news of her rejection had already spread. She could try to find work here in Ukiah, but Preston owned the largest mercantile, and no one would hire her if it meant crossing him. Or she could accept Parker Iverson's offer and at least have a roof over her head while she figured out her next move. "I want to make something clear," she said, lifting her chin. "I will be your housekeeper, nothing more. If you have other expectations, you can take the trunk and I will find another solution." "Fair enough." Parker bent and lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing, hefting it onto his broad shoulder. "My wagon is across the street. You coming or not?" Victoria took a deep breath and followed him off the platform, her boots clicking against the sun-bleached wood. Whatever happened next could not possibly be worse than standing on that platform with nowhere to go. Parker's wagon was a sturdy affair, built for work rather than comfort, with the name Double I Ranch painted on the side in fading letters. He loaded her trunk into the back with care, securing it with ropes so it would not slide during the journey. Then he offered his hand to help her onto the bench seat. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip steady and impersonal. Victoria settled onto the hard wooden seat, arranging her skirts as Parker climbed up beside her and took the reins. The 2 horses, a matched pair of bay mares, started forward at his command. They left Ukiah behind, heading north on a rutted dirt road that cut through endless golden grassland. The September sun beat down without mercy, and Victoria was grateful for her bonnet, though it did little to combat the heat. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding the last remnants of winter snow despite the warm autumn temperatures. "How long have you owned the ranch?" Victoria asked after they had traveled in silence for nearly a mile. The quiet felt oppressive after the constant noise of Boston. 6 years. Bought it from a man heading back east after his wife died. He let it run down pretty badly. Spent the first 2 years just getting it back into working order. Parker kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands easy on the reins. "Got about 300 head of cattle now, some horses. It is a good piece of land once you get past the stubbornness of it." "Is that why you needed the money from Mr. Preston so desperately? To keep the ranch running?" "Needed the money because a deal is a deal. Preston agreed to pay for prime beef cattle. I delivered them, and he has been dodging payment ever since." A muscle tightened in Parker's jaw. Man should honor his commitments. The irony was not lost on Victoria. Yes, he should. Parker glanced at her then, really looked at her, and she saw understanding flash across his face. "He never even spoke to you, did he? Just sent you back like a package with the wrong contents." "He looked at me through his shop window. I saw the curtain move. Then his clerk came out and said there had been a mistake, and I should return to Boston on the next train. Victoria stared at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. I am not what he expected, apparently. His loss, Parker said simply, and returned his attention to the road. They lapsed into silence again, but it felt less strained than before. Victoria studied the landscape rolling past, so different from the tree-lined streets of Boston. Everything here was bigger, wilder, touched with a savage beauty that both frightened and thrilled her. The sky stretched endless and blue, unmarred by factory smoke or city haze. The Double I Ranch appeared in the distance after nearly 2 hours of travel. The main house was larger than Victoria had expected, a 2-story structure built from logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The barn stood nearby, weathered but solid, with a corral holding several horses. Beyond that, she could see cattle grazing across rolling hills that seemed to stretch forever. As Parker pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, 3 men emerged from the barn. They were all younger than Parker, probably in their early 20s, dressed in the same worn denim and dust that seemed to be the uniform of ranch work. Boys, this is Miss Hartwell. She will be keeping house for us, so mind your manners and keep your boots off her clean floors. Parker jumped down from the wagon and reached up to help Victoria descend. Miss Hartwell, that is Tom, Jake, and Samuel. They are good workers and will treat you with respect. The 3 ranch hands pulled off their hats in unison, revealing sunburned faces and curious eyes. Tom, the tallest, had a friendly smile. Jake looked barely old enough to shave. Samuel, despite sharing a name with Victoria's failed suitor, had kind eyes and an easy manner. Pleased to meet you, miss, Tom said. We will be glad to have some decent cooking around here. The boss burns everything he touches. I do not burn everything, Parker protested. Just most things. This drew chuckles from the ranch hands, and Victoria felt some of her tension ease. Whatever else this place might be, it did not feel threatening. Parker carried her trunk inside while Victoria followed, taking in her new surroundings. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and furniture that looked handmade but sturdy. Everything was covered in a layer of dust that suggested thorough cleaning had not been a priority. Dishes were stacked on every available surface, and she could see mud tracked across the wooden floors. I know it is a mess, Parker said, setting her trunk down at the foot of the stairs. Like I said, we have been without proper household management for a while. It has good bones, Victoria replied diplomatically. It just needs attention. She followed him upstairs to a bedroom that was surprisingly nice, with a real bed frame, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch. The room was clean, at least, though sparsely furnished. This was supposed to be for my sister, before she decided to marry a banker in Denver instead. Parker crossed to the window and checked the lock. It is secure, and like I said, you can lock the door from the inside. You will be safe here, Miss Hartwell. Thank you, Mr. Iverson. Victoria met his eyes, trying to convey the depth of her gratitude. You did not have to do this. You could have just taken the trunk. Probably. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. But my mother raised me better than that. Supper is usually around 7. Take your time settling in. After he left, closing the door behind him, Victoria sank onto the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. This morning she had been prepared to meet her husband and start her new life. Instead, she had been rejected, nearly left destitute, and now found herself employed as a housekeeper on a cattle ranch in the middle of the Montana Territory. She should have felt devastated. Instead, as she looked around the simple room with its sturdy furniture and clean sheets, she felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in years, she was not trying to meet someone else's expectations. Samuel Preston had wanted a bride who looked a certain way, acted a certain way. Her father had wanted her to marry well and secure her future. Her mother, before consumption had taken her 5 years ago, had wanted her to be the perfect lady. Here, all Parker Iverson wanted was someone who could keep a house clean and prepare decent meals. It was honest work with clear expectations. There was something freeing in that simplicity. Victoria unpacked her trunk, hanging her few dresses in the narrow wardrobe and arranging her toiletries on the washstand. She had 3 books, all purchased with the thought that the long Montana winters might be lonely. She set them on the small table beside the bed. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped carefully in cloth, was her mother's silver hairbrush and mirror set, the only valuable thing she truly owned. She placed them on the washstand with reverent care. Once she had settled her belongings, Victoria went downstairs to assess the kitchen. It was worse than she had imagined. Pots with remnants of burned food sat soaking in cold water. The stove needed blackening. The pantry was reasonably well stocked but disorganized, with flour and sugar stored in containers that did not seal properly. Mice had gotten into the cornmeal. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time 7 o'clock approached, Victoria had made significant progress. The dishes were washed and put away. The stove was clean and hot, with a pot of beef stew simmering on top and cornbread baking in the oven. She had swept the floors and wiped down the tables. The kitchen would not pass her mother's inspection, but it was respectable. Parker came in first, stopping in the doorway to stare at the transformation. He had washed up, she noticed, his face clean and his hair damp. The ranch hands filed in behind him, equally stunned. "You did all this in one afternoon?" Parker asked, taking in the clean kitchen with obvious surprise. "The basic necessities, yes. There is still much more to be done, but at least we will not be eating off dirty plates." Victoria ladled stew into bowls, adding a piece of cornbread to each. "I hope everyone likes beef stew." The pantry contents dictated the menu. The men attacked their food with the enthusiasm of people who had been living on burned beans and tough jerky. Victoria found herself smiling at their obvious appreciation. "Miss Hartwell, this is delicious," Tom said around a mouthful of cornbread. "You sure you did not sneak magic into this?" "Just salt and proper cooking time," Victoria replied, taking her own seat at the table. "Though I appreciate the compliment." "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Jake asked, already reaching for seconds. "My mother taught me. After she passed, I kept house for my father and managed his law office. Cooking for 5 is easier than hosting the dinner parties he required for his business associates." Victoria stirred her stew, memories washing over her. "I learned to make much from little during the lean years." "Your father was a lawyer." Parker leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "That explains the way you talk. You have had education." "My father believed women should be as educated as men, even if society disagreed. He taught me Latin, mathematics, literature." Said a sharp mind was worth more than a pretty face. Victoria smiled sadly. Not that it mattered much in the end. When he died, his colleagues made it clear that a woman could not take over his practice. "I had the choice of finding a husband or finding a position as a governess or teacher." "So you chose mail-order bride," Samuel said quietly. "Seemed like the better option. It seemed like an adventure, a chance to start fresh somewhere new." Victoria met their curious gazes without flinching. "I was wrong about that, clearly." "Preston is a fool," Parker said flatly. "Any man would be lucky to have someone with your skills and intelligence." The compliment, delivered in his matter-of-fact tone, hit differently than flattery from Boston gentlemen ever had. Parker was not trying to charm her. He was simply stating what he saw as truth. "Thank you," Victoria said softly. "That is kind of you to say." After dinner, the ranch hands retreated to the barn while Parker helped Victoria clear the dishes. She protested, saying he was the employer and should not be doing servants' work, but he ignored her and kept washing plates in the basin. "I do not hold much with the idea that some work is beneath certain people," he said. "We all do what needs doing here. That is how a ranch runs." They worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying. Victoria found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her, the way his sleeves were rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, the careful way he handled the dishes despite his large hands. "Can I ask you something?" Parker said as they finished the last of the plates. "Of course. Why did Preston really send you back? You said he looked at you through the window. What did he see that made him refuse you?" Victoria dried her hands on a towel, considering how much to reveal. "I believe he was expecting someone more conventionally beautiful. Someone younger, perhaps, or more fashionable. I am passably pretty at best, and I know I can seem too serious, too educated. Some men find that intimidating. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard." Parker shook his head in disgust. "Beauty fades, fashion changes, but character, intelligence, those things last. You sound very certain about that." "I am certain about what matters." He hung up the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "You need to understand something, Miss Hartwell. I run a working ranch. I do not have time for games or complicated social rules. I say what I mean. So when I tell you that Preston is a fool, I mean it. When I say you are safe here, I mean that too. And when I say that you have earned your place at this table through your hard work today, I am telling you the simple truth." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heat from the stove. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Iverson. Call me Parker. Mr. Iverson was my father, and he has been dead for 10 years. He moved toward the door, then paused. "Get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." After he left, Victoria stood in the quiet kitchen, listening to the sounds of the Montana night through the open window. Crickets sang in the grass. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. The air smelled of sage and earth and possibilities. She had come to Montana to be a wife and had ended up a housekeeper instead. It was not what she had planned, but as she climbed the stairs to her room and locked the door behind her, Victoria realized she felt more hopeful than she had in months. The next 2 weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Victoria woke before dawn to start breakfast, feeding the men before they headed out for the day's work. She cleaned, organized, and slowly brought order to the chaos of the ranch house. The pantry was reorganized, the windows washed until they gleamed, the floors scrubbed clean. She found old curtains in a trunk and mended them, hanging them in the main room to soften the harsh masculine space. Parker paid her in advance at the end of the first week, counting out the money with careful precision. Victoria accepted it with gratitude, folding the bills carefully and placing them in her mother's jewelry box upstairs. It was the first money she had earned herself, and it felt different from any allowance or gift she had ever received. The ranch hands adopted her as something between a mother figure and a sister, despite her being close to their age. Tom taught her to recognize the different birds that nested in the barn. Jake showed her the best places to find wild herbs for cooking. Samuel carved her a new wooden spoon after she mentioned that the existing ones were all warped from heat, but it was Parker who occupied her thoughts more than she cared to admit. He was nothing like the men she had known in Boston. He did not quote poetry or make elegant conversation. He worked from dawn until dark, repairing fences, tending cattle, breaking horses. He came in every evening covered in dust and sweat, and yet he always cleaned up before dinner, always thanked her for the meal, always asked about her day. He was kind in small, practical ways. When he noticed her struggling to reach the high shelves in the pantry, he built her a sturdy step stool. When a late September storm blew through, he checked her room personally to make sure the roof was not leaking. When she mentioned missing the library in Boston, he rode into Ukiah and returned with 3 books borrowed from the town's small collection. "They are not fancy literature," he said, handing them to her with something almost like shyness. "But the librarian said they were popular." Victoria looked at the titles and felt her throat tighten with emotion. He had borrowed a collection of Tennyson's poems, a novel by Dickens, and a book about Montana's territorial history. He had chosen with thought and care, trying to match her interests. "They are perfect," she said honestly. "Thank you, Parker." The sound of his given name seemed to please him. His gray eyes warmed and the corner of his mouth ticked up in what passed for a smile. "You are welcome, Victoria." It was the first time he had called her by her first name, and she felt the shift in their relationship as surely as the changing season. They were moving from employer and employee toward something else, something that both excited and frightened her. One evening in early October, Victoria was reading on the porch after dinner when Parker came out and settled into the chair beside her. He had a mug of coffee in his hands, and he stared out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You miss Boston?" he asked after a while. Victoria considered the question honestly. "I miss my parents. I miss the convenience of having shops nearby and the sound of church bells on Sunday mornings. But the city itself, not as much as I thought I would. What do you think of Montana?" "It is brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Everything here feels bigger, rawer, like the land has not decided yet whether to accept human presence or shake us off like fleas." She closed her book, keeping her finger between the pages. "But there is an honesty to it. The land does not pretend to be anything other than what it is." "That is a good way to put it." Parker sipped his coffee. "It can be a lonely life, though, especially for women used to social circles and cultural events." "I was lonely in Boston, too," Victoria admitted. "Surrounded by people but always aware that I did not quite fit their expectations. At least here, the loneliness is honest." Parker turned to look at her, his expression serious in the fading light. "You do not have to stay lonely. There are other ranchers in the territory. Good men looking for wives, men who would treat you better than Preston did." Something cold settled in Victoria's stomach. "Are you trying to find me another husband?" "No, maybe. I do not know." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You deserve more than being a housekeeper on a cattle ranch, Victoria. You should have a home of your own, children if you want them. A real life. This is a real life." Victoria set her book aside and stood up, needing to move. "For the first time since my father died, I feel like I am doing something that matters. I am not trying to mold myself into someone else's ideal. I am just existing as myself, and that is enough." Parker stood too, moving closer. "But what about the future? You are young. You should not spend your life cooking for hired hands and scrubbing floors." "Why do you care?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Am I not performing my duties adequately? You know that is not what I mean." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "You are the best thing that has happened to this ranch in years, but I do not want you to wake up one day and regret staying here." They stood facing each other on the porch, the sunset casting long shadows between them. Victoria could see the war in Parker's eyes, could sense the things he was not saying beneath the practical words. "What do you want, Parker?" she asked softly. He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw working as though fighting with himself. "I want you to be happy. That is all." It was not all, Victoria knew. She could see it in the way his gaze lingered on her face, in the tension in his shoulders, in the careful way he maintained distance between them. But he was too honorable to say more, too conscious of the power imbalance between employer and employee. "I am happy here," she said, deciding to be as honest as he always was. "Happier than I have been in a very long time. Please do not try to send me away." Relief flashed across his face so quickly she almost missed it. "All right. But if that changes, if you want something different, you will tell me. I promise." They returned to their chairs and sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead. Victoria felt the October wind carrying the promise of winter, and realized that she wanted to be here when the first snow fell, wanted to see what the ranch looked like covered in white, wanted to spend more evenings like this, sitting beside Parker Iverson and watching the sky change colors. The first snow came 2 weeks later, a light dusting that turned the world white overnight. Victoria woke to find Parker already in the kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove. "Sorry for invading your space," he said when he saw her in the doorway. "I wanted to get the house warmed up before you came down." "That was thoughtful, thank you." Victoria moved to the stove, adding wood to build up the heat. "Has it been snowing long? Started about an hour ago. Should stop soon. This is just a taste of what is coming." He watched her move around the kitchen with easy familiarity. "We will need to move the cattle to lower pastures today. Might not be back until after dark. I will keep dinner warm." Victoria started preparing breakfast, falling into the routine they had established. "Will the men need extra provisions to take with them?" "That would be helpful. Some bread and dried meat, maybe some of that coffee cake you made yesterday." He leaned against the counter, making no move to leave despite having delivered his message. "Victoria, I have been thinking." "About what?" "Winter is going to be hard. We will be snowed in for days at a time. The work will be brutal, and there will not be much to do for entertainment." He cleared his throat. "I thought maybe we should make sure you have everything you need. Books, sewing supplies, whatever would help pass the time." "I have enough to keep me occupied, but I appreciate your concern." She paused in her work to look at him directly. "Unless you are trying to find more reasons to ride into Ukiah," a flush crept up his neck. "I do not mind the trip. Parker Iverson, are you trying to spoil me?" "Maybe a little," he admitted, and this time his smile was full and genuine, transforming his usually serious face into something that made Victoria's heart skip. "You work hard. You deserve some comfort." Before Victoria could respond, Tom burst through the door in a flurry of snow. "Boss, we got a problem. 3 cows broke through the fence on the eastern pasture. They are heading toward the river." Parker was moving instantly, all business again. "Get Jake and Samuel. I will meet you at the barn in 5 minutes." He grabbed his hat and coat, then turned back to Victoria. "I do not know when we will be back." "Be careful," she said, then felt foolish for the maternal tone, but Parker did not seem to mind. His expression softened. "Always am." He was gone before she could say anything else, leaving Victoria alone in the warm kitchen with her confused feelings and the smell of coffee beginning to brew. The day stretched long and lonely. Victoria cleaned, cooked, and tried not to worry about Parker and the men out in the snow. She knew they were experienced, that they had survived Montana winters before she arrived. But that did not stop her from checking the window every hour, looking for signs of their return. It was well past dark when she finally heard horses in the yard. Victoria rushed to the door, pulling it open to find all 4 men trudging toward the house, covered in snow and looking exhausted. "Get inside and get warm," she ordered, holding the door wide. "I have hot water ready for washing and dinner has been waiting." They filed in gratefully, shedding their wet outer layers in the mudroom. Parker came last, his face red from cold but his eyes finding Victoria immediately. "Did you find the cows?" she asked. "Eventually. They were halfway to the next county." He pulled off his gloves with stiff fingers. "Took us most of the day to round them up and fix the fence. You must be frozen through. Go warm up by the fire. I will bring you something hot to drink." She bustled around the kitchen, preparing mugs of hot coffee laced with honey and a splash of whiskey from the bottle she had found in the pantry. The men accepted them gratefully, thawing out in front of the fireplace while Victoria set out dinner. They ate with barely any conversation, too tired for talk. One by one, the ranch hands finished their meals and headed to the barn, thanking Victoria as they went. Finally, only she and Parker remained in the kitchen. "You should go to bed," Victoria said, starting to clear the dishes. "You look exhausted. In a minute." Parker stood and moved to help her, despite her protests. "I was thinking about something today while we were chasing those damned cows through the snow." "What was that?" "How much I wanted to get back here, not just to the ranch but to this house. To this kitchen." He paused in his work, his hands still in the wash water. "To you," Victoria's breath caught. "Parker, I know I should not say it. You work for me, and it is not right to put you in an awkward position." He turned to face her, water dripping from his hands. "But I have never been good at lying, and I am tired of pretending I do not feel what I feel." "What do you feel?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Like I have been waiting my whole life for you to step off that train. Like this house was never really a home until you were in it. Like every meal we share is the best part of my day." He took a step closer. "I know you came here planning to marry someone else. I know you probably do not think of me that way, but I had to tell you the truth, Victoria. I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, though whether from joy or fear she could not say. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "You do not have to say anything. I am not asking you for something you cannot give." Parker's voice was gentle despite the emotion in his eyes. "I just wanted you to know, so you could decide what you want to do with that information." He started to turn away, but Victoria reached out and caught his hand. His skin was still cold from the wash water, but his fingers wrapped around hers with careful warmth. "I think about you too," she said quietly. "When you are out working, I find myself watching for your return. When you come in for dinner, I notice everything. The way you push your hair back when you are thinking, the careful way you handle things despite your strength, how you always make sure everyone else is taken care of before yourself." Parker went very still. "Victoria, I told myself I should not feel this way. That it was too soon, too complicated, that I was being foolish to develop feelings for my employer." She looked up at him, no longer trying to hide what was in her heart. "But you are right. Neither of us is good at lying." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I feel it too. This pull between us, this sense of rightness when we are together." She squeezed his hand. "I am saying that I do not want to be just your housekeeper anymore." Parker's free hand came up to cup her face, his touch reverent. "Tell me what you want." "I want what I thought I would have when I came to Montana. A home, a partner, someone who sees me as I am and values that." Victoria leaned into his touch. "I want you, Parker." He kissed her then, soft and careful as though she might break, but Victoria was not fragile. She had traveled across the country alone, survived rejection, and carved out a place for herself in this wild land. She kissed him back with all the strength she possessed, pouring weeks of longing into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Parker rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, take you to church socials, introduce you to the neighboring ranchers as my intended. I want everyone to know that you are choosing me freely, not because you feel obligated." "I do not feel obligated," Victoria smiled up at him, "but I would like to be courted properly. I would like people to know that I am yours. Then that is what we will do." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and full of promise. "But right now, you should get some sleep. Tomorrow I will start figuring out how to be a proper suitor." Victoria laughed softly. "I think you are doing just fine already." They finished the dishes together, hands brushing frequently, stealing glances and small smiles. When the work was done, Parker walked her to the stairs and bid her good night with another soft kiss that left Victoria's head spinning. She lay in bed that night listening to the house settle, the wind outside, the distant sound of Parker's footsteps in his room down the hall. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours, and yet it also felt inevitable, like they had been moving toward this moment since she stepped off the train. The next morning brought clear skies and bright sunshine reflecting off the snow. Parker was already up when Victoria came downstairs, dressed in his Sunday clothes instead of work gear. "What is the occasion?" she asked, taking in the clean shirt and press trousers. "I am taking you to Ukiah. Figured we should do this proper, and that starts with me buying you a gift." He looked almost shy. "If you are willing, I would like that very much." They made the journey to town in the wagon, sitting close together on the bench seat with a thick blanket over their legs. Parker pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories about the ranch and the territory. Victoria found herself fascinated by his history, the way he had built something from nothing through sheer determination. Ukiah looked different today, less threatening than it had when Victoria had arrived alone and afraid. Now she rode into town sitting beside a man she was beginning to love, her future no longer a frightening unknown but a possibility full of hope. Parker helped her down from the wagon in front of the general store, his hands lingering on her waist just a moment longer than necessary. Victoria felt the eyes of townspeople on them, curious and speculating. Inside the store, Parker guided her to the counter where bolts of fabric were displayed. "Pick out something you like. I want you to have material for a new dress. Something just for you, not purchased with Preston's money." Victoria ran her fingers over the fabrics, finally settling on a deep green wool that reminded her of pine forests. "This is beautiful." "Then that is the one." Parker counted out the money without hesitation, then added lace trim and matching thread. "Anything else you need? Ribbons? Buttons?" "Parker, this is already too much. It is courting. I am supposed to spoil you a little." He smiled at her, and Victoria felt her heart swell. They left the store with their purchases and ran into the minister, Reverend Clark, on the street. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. "Parker Iverson, good to see you in town, and this must be the young lady staying out at your ranch." The Reverend tipped his hat to Victoria. "I have heard good things about your housekeeping skills, Miss Hartwell." "Thank you, Reverend." Victoria felt Parker stiffen beside her. "Miss Hartwell is more than my housekeeper," Parker said firmly. "I am courting her with the intention of marriage if she will have me. I wanted that to be clear." The Reverend's eyebrows rose, but his smile was warm. "Well then, congratulations to you both. I hope to see you at services on Sunday, Miss Hartwell. The community would be glad to welcome you properly." They spoke for a few more minutes before parting ways. As they walked back to the wagon, Victoria slipped her hand into Parker's. "You did not have to make such a public declaration," she said. "Yes, I did. I want everyone to know my intentions. I do not want anyone thinking less of you for living under my roof." He squeezed her hand. "Your reputation matters, Victoria. Thank you." She felt warmth spread through her chest at his consideration. "For protecting me." "Always," he promised. They made one more stop before leaving town at the small jewelry shop run by a Chinese immigrant named Mr. Chen. Parker led Victoria inside and asked to see the rings. "Parker, we do not need to rush this," Victoria protested, even as her heart raced. "I am not rushing. I am being practical." He examined the selection carefully. "Winter is coming. We might not make it back to town for weeks once the snow sets in proper. I want to have a ring ready for when you are ready to accept it." Mr. Chen showed them several options, and Parker finally selected a simple gold band with a small diamond set in the center. It was elegant without being ostentatious, perfect for the life of a rancher's wife. "What do you think?" Parker asked, holding it up to the light. "I think it is beautiful," Victoria said honestly. Parker purchased the ring and slipped it into his pocket. "When you are ready, when you are sure this is what you want, I will ask you properly. No pressure, no obligation. Just an honest question deserving of an honest answer." They drove back to the ranch in comfortable silence, Victoria's head resting on Parker's shoulder. The autumn sun was warm despite the cold air, and the mountains in the distance looked like they were painted against the sky. Over the next few weeks, Parker courted Victoria with the same steady determination he applied to everything in his life. He carved her a jewelry box from cedar wood, the lid inlaid with a pattern of wildflowers. He taught her to ride so she could explore the ranch property, staying patient through her early nervousness. He read aloud to her in the evenings, his rough voice stumbling over poetry but making the words sound honest and real. The ranch hands watched this courtship with obvious approval. Tom started leaving wildflowers on the kitchen table, claiming he found them while working but fooling no one. Jake made sure to take the younger horses when he and Victoria rode together, keeping her safe. Samuel carved a set of matching rings as a practice piece, then presented them shyly as a gift, saying every couple should have them. The first hard freeze came in mid-November, locking the land in winter's grip. Parker moved the cattle to the winter pastures and stocked up on supplies for the months ahead. The work was brutal, requiring long hours in bitter cold. But every night he came home to Victoria's cooking, to the warm house, to stolen moments by the fire. One evening in late November, as they sat together after dinner with the ranch hands gone to their bunks, Parker took Victoria's hand. "There is something I want to show you," he said. "Put on your warm coat." Curious, Victoria bundled up and followed him outside. The night was crisp and clear, the sky ablaze with stars. Parker led her away from the house, out to a spot where the land rose slightly, giving them a view of the entire ranch. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, "when I am trying to figure out what comes next." "It is beautiful," Victoria breathed, watching the moonlight reflect off the snow-covered hills. "I wanted to bring you here because I want you to see what I see. This ranch, this land, it is everything I have built. It is my past and my future." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "But it does not mean anything without someone to share it with. Parker." Victoria's breath caught as he reached into his pocket. "I know we have only known each other for a few months. I know this is not the fancy courtship you might have had in Boston. But I also know that every day I spend with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has." He pulled out the ring they had chosen together. "Victoria Hartwell, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, and make this ranch a real home?" Victoria looked at the ring, at Parker's face so earnest in the moonlight, at the land stretching around them full of possibility. She thought about the woman she had been when she stepped off that train, frightened and rejected. She thought about who she had become in these months, strong and capable and valued. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Parker's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her under the Montana stars, and Victoria felt like she had finally come home. They married 3 weeks later, on a cold December day with the whole territory invited to celebrate. Reverend Clark performed the ceremony in the small church in Ukiah, his words about love and commitment ringing through the wooden building. Victoria wore a dress made from the green wool Parker had bought her, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Parker wore a new suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome. Tom, Jake, and Samuel stood as witnesses, along with several neighboring ranchers who had become friends. Even Judge Harrington attended, the same man who had ruled that Parker could claim Victoria's trunk to settle Preston's debt. "Funny how things work out," the judge said at the reception, raising his glass. "A legal decision brought you two together. I like to think I played matchmaker." "You played debt collector," Parker corrected, but he was smiling. "But I will admit the result was better than I expected." Preston himself did not attend, unsurprisingly. Victoria had seen him once since that first day in passing on the street. He had looked at her without recognition, as though she were a stranger. She found she did not care. That chapter of her life was closed. The reception was held at the ranch, with the house decorated in pine boughs and the kitchen full of food prepared by neighboring ranch wives. Victoria moved through the celebration feeling like she was floating, Parker's hand always nearby to steady her. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Victoria found herself standing on the porch with Sarah Mitchell, the wife of a neighboring rancher. Sarah was about 10 years older than Victoria, with kind eyes and a practical manner. "You look happy," Sarah observed. "Really happy." "I am," Victoria admitted. "I know it is strange considering how I came here, but I cannot imagine my life any other way now." "That is not strange at all. Some of the best things come from unexpected places." Sarah squeezed her hand. "Parker is a good man. He will take care of you. And from what I have heard, you will take care of him right back. That is what marriage should be." After the last guest left, Parker and Victoria stood together in the kitchen, surveying the mess from the celebration. "Leave it," Parker said when Victoria started to clean. "It can wait until tomorrow." "But it can wait." He pulled her close, his arms strong around her. "Tonight is for us." He carried her up the stairs to the bedroom they would now share, the same room where Victoria had spent her first night at the ranch, but everything was different now. Parker set her down gently and helped her out of the green dress with careful, reverent hands. "I love you," he said, the words still new and precious between them. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Victoria replied, and knew it was true down to her bones. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet, full of whispered promises and gentle discoveries. Parker treated her like something precious, and Victoria showed him that she was stronger than she looked. When they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Victoria felt complete in a way she never had before. The winter settled in hard after their wedding, just as Parker had predicted. They spent weeks snowed in, the ranch isolated from the rest of the world. But the forced intimacy only brought them closer. Parker taught Victoria about ranching, explaining his plans for the herd and the land. Victoria continued to manage the household, but now she also helped with record keeping, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with accounts and expenses. The ranch hands treated her with affection and respect, clearly pleased that their boss had found happiness. Tom started calling her Mrs. I, and the nickname stuck. Jake taught her to play poker during long evenings, though she suspected he let her win more than he should. Samuel showed her how to mend leather tack, his patient instruction helping her master the skill. Spring came slowly to Montana, the snow reluctant to release its grip. But eventually, the ice melted and the grass began to green. Parker started talking about expanding the herd, buying more land. Victoria planted a garden behind the house, determined to have fresh vegetables through the summer. One morning in late March, Victoria woke feeling queasy. At first, she blamed it on something she had eaten, but when the feeling persisted for a week, she began to suspect the truth. She waited another week to be sure before telling Parker. He had just come in from morning chores when she caught him in the mudroom. "I need to tell you something," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Parker's expression shifted immediately to concern. "What is wrong? Are you sick?" "Not sick exactly." Victoria took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think we are going to have a baby." For a moment, Parker just stared at her, processing the information. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "A baby, you are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there." She watched him anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" Instead of answering, Parker picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Happy, Victoria, I am beyond happy." "I am," he set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? Did I hurt you? I am fine. We are fine." Victoria laughed at his worried expression. "I am pregnant, not made of glass." But Parker was already treating her like she was precious and breakable, insisting she sit down, bringing her water, asking if she needed anything. Victoria put up with his fussing because she knew it came from love. The news spread through the ranch quickly. The hands were thrilled, immediately starting to argue about who would teach the baby to ride first. Sarah Mitchell came to visit and brought clothes her own children had outgrown, along with advice about pregnancy and childbirth. As Victoria's belly grew through the summer, Parker became increasingly protective. He forbade her from lifting heavy things, worried constantly about her health, and generally drove her slightly crazy with his hovering. But she also found it endearing, the way he could not stop touching her stomach, talking to the baby, making plans for their future. "I am thinking we should expand the house," he said one evening in late summer, his hand resting on her rounded belly. "Add another room for the baby. Maybe 2 rooms in case there are more children later." "That sounds perfect," Victoria agreed, leaning into his touch. "I want them to have everything. Good education, opportunities, choices." Parker's voice was serious. "Boy or girl, they are going to know they can be anything they want." "Like your father taught you." "Like your father taught you," he corrected. "I want to give our children what he gave you, that belief that intelligence and character matter more than anything else." Victoria turned to kiss him, overwhelmed with love for this man who had claimed her trunk at a train station, and somehow ended up claiming her heart as well. Their son was born in October, on a crisp autumn day exactly 1 year after Parker had proposed. The birth was hard, attended by Sarah Mitchell and Dr. Pemberton from Ukiah. Parker paced outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards until finally Sarah opened the door with a smile. "You have a son. Both mother and baby are healthy." Parker burst into the room to find Victoria exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, as though afraid to disturb them. "Come meet your son," Victoria said softly. Parker sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the small face, red and wrinkled and perfect. "He is beautiful. He is he not?" Victoria traced one tiny hand with her finger. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Parker said, "James, after your father, James Iverson." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. "He would have been so proud. And for a middle name, Thomas, after my father." Parker looked at Victoria for approval. "James Thomas Iverson," Victoria said, testing it out. "It is perfect." Little James was a calm baby, sleeping well and eating regularly. Parker was besotted from the first moment, spending every free minute holding his son, talking to him, showing him the ranch even though James was far too young to understand. The ranch hands competed for the baby's attention. Tom carved toys. Jake sang ridiculous songs to make James smile. Samuel fashioned a tiny leather vest, declaring that James needed to look the part of a rancher. As winter came again, the house that had been quiet and lonely before Victoria arrived was now filled with the sounds of family. James's cries in the night, Parker's laughter, Victoria's singing as she worked. It was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely perfect. On their first anniversary, Parker gave Victoria a painting he had commissioned from an artist in Helena. It showed the Double-I Ranch from the spot where he had proposed, the house and barn and mountains all captured in loving detail. "So you never forget what we built together," he said as she unwrapped it. "I could never forget," Victoria replied, kissing him. "This ranch, this life, it is everything I never knew I wanted." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and hard work and love. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious boy, his hair dark like Parker's and his eyes the same gray. Victoria became pregnant again when James was 3, this time with twin girls they named Emma Rose and Lily Grace. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Parker adding on room after room. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Parker's cattle business grew, and Victoria's careful record keeping ensured they always knew exactly where they stood financially. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, cattle rustlers and market fluctuations, always together. Victoria never returned to Boston, though she corresponded regularly with old friends. The life she had left behind felt like it belonged to a different person. She was no longer the scared young woman who had stepped off the train to be rejected. She was Parker Iverson's wife, mother to 3 children, co-owner of a successful ranch. She was strong and capable and valued. When James turned 10, Parker took him on his first cattle drive. Victoria watched them ride off together, father and son, and felt her heart swell with pride and love. Emma and Lily, now 7, stood beside her waving goodbye. "When can we go on a cattle drive?" Emma demanded. She was the more adventurous of the twins, always wanting to be where the action was. "When you are old enough to handle the work," Victoria said. "Your father does not care if you are a boy or a girl. He only cares that you can do the job well." "Good," Lily said quietly. She was the thoughtful twin, content to help Victoria in the house and garden, but always listening, always learning. "Because I want to keep the books like you do, Mama." "Then I will teach you," Victoria promised. She thought about the trunk that had started everything, the one Parker had claimed to settle a debt. Most of its contents were long gone, worn out or outgrown. But Victoria still had her mother's silver brush and mirror set, now carefully stored for Emma and Lily when they were older. And she had the books Parker had borrowed from the library that first month, which he had eventually purchased for her. They sat on the shelf in the parlor, a reminder of when their love was new and fragile. Sometimes, usually late at night when the house was quiet, Parker would ask Victoria if she ever regretted how things had happened. If she wished Preston had not rejected her, if she had married him and lived a comfortable life in town instead of the hard work of ranch life. Victoria always gave him the same answer: "I regret nothing. Preston sent me back unopened, and you claimed my trunk and my heart at that station. It was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me," and she meant it. Every word. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. There were droughts that tested their resolve and boom years that filled their bank account. Tom married a schoolteacher and built a cabin on the ranch property, becoming Parker's foreman. Jake headed to California to seek his fortune but wrote regularly, his letters full of adventure. Samuel stayed on, quiet and steady, eventually marrying Sarah Mitchell's daughter and starting his own small ranch nearby. James grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch operations. Emma shocked the territory by becoming one of the first women to attend agricultural college, returning with new ideas about cattle breeding and pasture management. Lily married a lawyer in Ukiah and kept books for several businesses in town, her neat handwriting as precise as her mother's had been. Parker's hair turned silver at the temples, and Victoria found laugh lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But they still sat together on the porch in the evenings, still stole kisses in the kitchen when they thought no one was looking, still talked about everything and nothing as the sun set over their land. On their 25th anniversary, Parker took Victoria back to Ukiah Station. The platform looked much the same as it had that September day in 1878 when she had stood there alone and afraid. "What are we doing here?" Victoria asked, confused. "I wanted to come back to where it all started," Parker said. "I wanted to stand on this platform and tell you thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For being brave enough to travel across the country alone, for being strong enough to survive rejection, for being foolish enough to trust a stranger who wanted to claim your trunk." He took both her hands in his. "For choosing me, Victoria. Every day for 25 years you have chosen me. That is more than I ever dreamed I would have." Victoria felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I chose you because you chose me first. When I had nothing, when I was nothing in the eyes of the world, you saw worth. You offered me a place and made it a home. I did not fall in love with the ranch, Parker. I fell in love with you." They kissed on the platform where their story had begun, no longer strangers but partners who had built a life together from nothing but determination and love. The years continued their march, bringing grandchildren and new challenges. The Montana Territory became a state in 1889, and the Iverson Ranch was part of the celebration. Parker served on the county council, using his influence to ensure fair treatment for all ranchers, large and small. Victoria became known throughout the region for her charitable work, helping new settlers and supporting the church. As they grew older, they gradually handed over the daily operations of the ranch to James and Emma, who ran it together in a partnership that mirrored their parents. Victoria spent more time in her garden, growing flowers alongside vegetables, creating beauty in the harsh landscape. Parker took up woodworking, making furniture for his growing brood of grandchildren. But they never lost the connection that had sparked that first evening when Victoria made beef stew in a clean kitchen. They still talked for hours, still laughed at each other's jokes, still found comfort in each other's presence. On a cool September evening in 1903, 25 years after Victoria had first arrived in Montana, she and Parker sat on their porch watching the sunset. 7 grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. James was repairing a fence in the distance. Emma was in the barn checking on a pregnant mare. Lily had brought her family for Sunday dinner and had not left yet, her 3 children reluctant to leave their cousins. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Victoria asked, her head resting on Parker's shoulder. "When you found me on the platform, I said that your trunk belonged to me." Parker smiled at the memory. "I was an arrogant fool. You were honest, direct. You saw something you wanted and you claimed it." Victoria laced her fingers through his. "You claimed my trunk and you claimed my heart, all in one day. Best decision I ever made. Mine too." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned purple and the first stars appeared. The ranch that had been Parker's alone was now a family legacy, built on love and hard work, and the chance meeting of two people at a train station. Victoria thought about the woman she had been, the mail-order bride sent back unopened. She thought about the fear and humiliation of that moment. And she thought about how that rejection had led her to the greatest love of her life, to a man who valued her mind as much as her cooking, who treated her as an equal partner, who gave her a home and a family and a place to belong. "I would do it all again," she said quietly. "Every hard moment, every struggle, it was all worth it to end up here with you." Parker pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Every single day with you has been a gift, Victoria, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because we faced them together." As the last light faded from the sky and their grandchildren were called inside for bed, Parker and Victoria remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. They had built something beautiful from rejection and debt settlement and a trunk full of possessions. They had created a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. And it all started because Samuel Preston had sent a mail-order bride back unopened, and Parker Iverson had claimed her trunk and her heart at the station. The fire of their love had never dimmed, not through 25 years of marriage, not through the challenges of frontier life, not through aging and change. They had promised to love each other through everything, and they had kept that promise every single day. Inside the house, someone lit a lamp, golden light spilling onto the porch. Their family was gathering for the evening, the house full of multiple generations, all connected by the decision two people made on a train platform long ago. Victoria smiled, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Parker tightened his arms around her, and she knew he felt the same. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had traveled across the country to find, even if she had not known it at the time. The mail-order bride who had been rejected sight unseen had found something better than she could have imagined. A true partnership, a real home, and a love that would last forever. As they finally stood to go inside, joining their family in the warm glow of lamplight, Victoria took one last look at the Montana sky, vast and full of stars. She had come here with nothing but a trunk full of hope, and she had gained everything that truly mattered. And she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here, to this porch, to this life, to this man who had seen her value when no one else had. Their love story had started with rejection and a debt settlement, but it had blossomed into something rare and precious. Parker held the door open for her, his smile warm and familiar after so many years. Victoria took his hand and stepped inside, knowing that whatever years remained to them would be filled with the same love and partnership that had sustained them through everything. The mail-order bride had found her home at last, not with the man who had sent for her, but with the rancher who had claimed her heart along with her trunk. And in that moment of rejection and unexpected salvation, their forever had begun.